Faculty of Education, 4th Year General, Victorian and Contemporary Poetry. The Lyric Poem. The lyric poem is the most personal and private of the literary genres. It is a comparatively short, non-narrative poem in which a single speaker presents a state of mind or an emotional state. Lyric poetry retains some of the elements of song, which is said to be its origin. For Greek writers, the lyric was a song accompanied by the lyre. The subcategories of the lyric are elegy, ode, sonnet, and dramatic monologue, and most occasional poetry. In Europe, the lyric emerged as the principal poetic form of the 19th century. Romantic lyric poetry consisted of first-person accounts of the thoughts and the feelings of a specific moment. The feelings were extreme but personal. During the Romantic period, the traditional sonnet was revived in Britain, whether the Shakespearean sonnet or the Petrarchan sonnet. Victorian lyric was more linguistically self-conscious. Pioneer Victorian poets are Alfred Tennyson, Robert Browning, Emily Dickinson, and Matthew Arnold. It is less spontaneous and song-like than the Elizabethan lyric, but superior in its range, suggestiveness, variety, and richness. The pioneer Victorian poets. On your left is Alfred Tennyson. In the middle is Matthew Arnold. On your right is Robert Browning. During the 20th century, rhymed lyric poetry once more became a mainstream poetic form. 20th century poets wrote mostly short poems, and the long poems that they wrote were still concentrated verse, therefore lyrical. It rhymed and usually expressed the feelings of the poet, human experience, and the harsh realities of war. Many lyric poems are social in nature, recording the consequences for individuals of institutional injustice and brutality. Such poems are called poems of witness. Love and passion, anger and loss, joy and despair, these are the realm in which the lyric poet works. But the poet's predicament is that there are times when the world, the social world in which we all live, impinges on the poet. Poets need to testify to that suffering and record it so that others, those who are ignorant of or blind to the suffering, those future generations who might otherwise not comprehend the suffering of the past, can see just how deep was the tide of human suffering and how many perished in its flooding waters. Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, rejected the English lyric form of the 19th century, feeling that it relied too heavily on melodious language and decorative imagery. Rather than complexity of thought, the major events which occurred throughout the 20th century, World War I and World War II, had an impact on poetry. Poetry, at its core, tries to make sense of human experience, and lyrics express life at its intense moment. The suffering and loss which came with war culminated in poems that elevated feelings of grief and guilt. What occurs when war and lyric are put together is elegy. The elegiac note, however, as can be seen in the work of Wilfred Owen or Thomas Hardy, often manifests itself through expressions of protest. This all led to the reclamation of poetry as a form of protest and by extension a form of power. The tension between the traditional subjects of lyric poetry and the horrors of war are expressed in the war poetry of Wilfred Owen, Siegfried Sassoon and others. The American New Criticism returned to the lyric in the 1950s, advocating a poetry that made conventional use of rhyme, meter and stanzas, and was modestly personal in the lyric tradition. Long personal epics such as Allen Ginsberg's Howl, 1926-1997, were a reaction against the well-wrought short lyric of the New Criticism. Lyric poetry dealt with relationships, sex, and domestic life. Alfred Tennyson from In Memoriam. Tennyson's elegy In Memoriam, 1850, is a high watermark in Tennyson's poetic production. It is a splendid tribute to friendship, having been written over a period of years commemorating a friend who had died in 1833. The theme of this long poem is the immortality of the soul. In reality, it is a series of 131 short poems held together loosely by this central theme. Alfred Tennyson begins in sorrow and bewilderment before the mystery of death and the meaning of life, passes through various stages of doubt and despair, and ends with a conviction that faith is man's firmest answer to the eternal questions. In Memoriam also reflects Tennyson's struggle with the Victorians' growing awareness of another sort of past, the vast expanse of geological time and evolutionary history. The new discoveries in biology, astronomy and geology implied a view of humanity that much distressed many Victorians, including Tennyson. Old yew, or willow tree, or a weeping willow tree, which usually is found in cemeteries or churchyards. O dew which graspest at the stones that name the underlying dead, thy fibres net the dreamless head, thy roots are wrapped about. The seasons bring the flower again, and bring the firstling to the flock, and in the dusk of thee the clock beats out the little lives of men. The clock here implies the passage of time. Beat, the word beat or the term beat, is a pun. It can mean the clock's ticking sound, the constant fixed rhythm of the clock's ticking or beating, the violent striking of time on man's life. Man's life is described as little, meaning small and limited. Little lives, firstling to the flock, alliteration. The word beat here means tick-tock, the rhythm made by a clock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Flock, a flock of sheep. Firstling of the flock, the newly born animal. Oh, not for thee the glow, the bloom, nor branding summer suns avail, who changes not in any gale to touch thy 1,000 years of gloom. And gazing on thee, sullen tree, sick for thy stubborn hardihood, I seem to fail from out my blood and grow incorporate into thee. A pun is a figure of speech. A pun is a play on words that produces a humorous effect by using a word that suggests two or more meanings, or by exploiting similar sounding words that have different meanings. Apart from being witty and humorous, puns add profound meanings to texts and shape the way in which the text is interpreted by the readers. Alfred Tennyson, Crossing the Bar, another lyric poem. Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me, and may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea. But such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from out our bourne of time and place the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar. This is a sandbar. Notice how the people are walking on it. But when the tide is very high, this sandbar cannot be seen and may be a danger to boats or ships that are passing through. Crossing the bar is an allegory. An allegory is a literary composition with a double meaning. It has a hidden moral significance. Thus, apparently, the poem tells of an ordinary event. It is on the surface a description of a voyage of the poet from Aldworth to Farringford, but really it is a description of the soul's journey to the unknown land of death. The poet tells of his departure from this world to the eternal home, which is the kingdom of heaven. The call, death, comes to him at sunset, implying the evening of his life, and he leaves his worldly home with a calm and serene mind. His mind is in perfect peace, calm sea, when he undertakes the voyage, when he dies, and sails to his destination, which is the kingdom of heaven. No sad farewells are expected, because he will be carried beyond time and place to the other desired world, where he will meet God. His journey does not frighten him, because he will meet the pilot, the divine guide, at the end of his voyage. Thus, in the poem, sunset and evening star symbolize old age. The call is the call of death, and moaning of the bar symbolizes the fear and agony of death. This world is the journey through the sea, and the other world, the infinite and eternal, is the real home of the soul. The poem is 4 quatrains. The poet uses the alternate rhyme. Writers use allegory to add different layers of meanings to their works. Allegory makes their stories and characters multi-dimensional, so that they stand for something larger in meaning than what they literally stand for. Allegory allows writers to put forward their moral and political point of view. This is an eagle clasping a crag a stone on a hill. Crooked hands. The word crooked is a pun. It can either mean the shape of the claws or the hands of the bird, or it can mean a crook. Alfred Tennyson, the eagle. He clasps the crag with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands, rigged with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls, he watches from his mountain walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls. The waves in the sea make the sea look as if it has wrinkles. And the way the waves move make the sea seem as if he is crawling like a baby or a reptile or a snake. The Eagle, first published in 1851, is a poem of 2 triplet stanzas. The poem is a perfect combination of sound and meaning. In a few lines, Tennyson captures a small but majestic event, an eagle diving from a cliff with total precision, implying how death manifests its work. The poem is remarkable for its minuteness of observation and preciseness of delineation. The form of the eagle is very neat and regular. Both stanzas are a series of 3 rhyming lines, so the poem is triplets. The meter of the poem consists primarily of iambs, unstressed and stressed feet. An iamb being a type of metrical foot with one unstressed beat followed by a stressed beat. He clasps the crag with crooked hands. Besides the alliteration that you can hear and the sounds that you can hear, the 2 words he clasps make up one foot, unstressed and stressed, and so on. In the second stanza, the setting shifts to the eagle's viewpoint. He watches the waves crawl towards the shore, like a thirsty man crawling towards an oasis. The sea has wrinkles like an old weak man. The eagle swivels its head from side to side, up and down. Great observation here, how the head moves in all directions. A moment later, we see a feathered shape drop off the crag and hurtle and dive toward the sea below. It saw its victim and caught it in an instant. This is Dover Beach in England. It overlooks the coast of France. Notice the high cliffs, the high chalk cliffs. Matthew Arnold, Dover Beach. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, Sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray, where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles, which the waves draw back and fling at their return upon the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence low, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another, for the world, which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, have really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. These are the pebbles on Dover beach, or the shingles as mentioned in stanza 1 in the poem. Dover Beach is an early poem of Matthew Arnold's, but published as late as 1867 in the anthology New Poems. Immediately after his marriage with Frances Lucy, Arnold visited Dover with her. Yet he does not feel happy, nor does he romanticize the situation. Arnold laments here the loss of religious faith in the Victorian age. A profoundly melancholy poem, Dover Beach has a nostalgic feeling. The mood of melancholy as expressed in Dover Beach is quite in harmony with the melancholy sound of the receding waves. The moonlit landscape at Dover is highly symbolic to the poet. The poet is sitting, looking out from a window near the English Channel at Dover. The chalk cliffs are looking bright as the moonlight is reflected on them. On the other side of the channel can be seen Calais in France. The waves are constantly dashing against the shore. What Arnold hears now was heard long ago by Sophocles on the Aegean Sea. He thinks that the sea is the symbol of human destiny. The sea is in full tide. The sea of faith, metaphor, was once full, but the ebb, the falling back of the sea, has already begun. The world has no meaning as faith decays, ebbs away. He does not know what he should hold on to. He concludes that amidst incertitude, blankness, and despair, only love alone can sustain him. Arnold indulges in sad musings as he watches the pebbles on the shore, advancing and retreating rhythmically. He is suddenly filled with the thought that the world, once full, has become dry and arid and full of shingles, small water-worn stones. The sea of faith has run dry, and skepticism, doubt, and agnosticism, those who question the presence of God, are stalking the land. Nevertheless, the melancholy note is relieved by the thought of love for his wife. Dover Beach is one of the greatest elegies of Arnold, and strikes a note of sadness. It does not mourn the death of a person, but of religious faith. A feeling of melancholy pervades the rhythmic sound of waves, and the pebbles, advancing and retreating, fill the poet's mind with sadness. The pebbles are constantly being drawn towards the sea and thrown back to the seashore, creating a rhythm, creating a sound, a sad sound. Edward Thomas, the owl. The owl is a nocturnal bird. It sleeps by day and wakes up by night. Edward Thomas, the owl. Downhill I came, hungry and yet not starved. Cold, yet had heat within me that was proof against the north wind. Tired, yet so that rest had seemed the sweetest thing under a roof. Then at the inn I had food, fire and rest, knowing how hungry, cold and tired was I. All of the night was quite barred out except an owl's cry, a most melancholy cry. Shaken out long and clear upon the hill, no merry note nor cause of merriment, but one telling me plain what I escaped and others could not, that night as in I went. And salted was my food and my repose, salted and sobered too by the bird's voice, speaking for all who lay under the stars, soldiers and poor, unable to rejoice. The Owl is a poem like many from its World War I period that draws on experiences from the front lines. A traveller's misery is recounted as he stops for the night at an inn. There are many structural, sound and figurative elements that help to create the poem's tone of dismay and its resolution of hope. The owl is narrated in the first person, and the traveller is not talking to anyone in particular. He simply recounts. The poem is broken down into 4 quatrains with similar line lengths. Each stanza is neat and compact, and takes on the same general shape, with every new line capitalized regardless of whether or not the sentence ended at the line break. The poem's rhythm is also unpredictable due to its unequal meter. For example, the first line of the word of the poem, downhill, is an I am, while the second line begins with cold, a lame foot, which can be either stressed or unstressed. The meter's scheme adds to the poem's theme of loneliness and unease that the traveller feels. The poem follows an alternate rhyme scheme. The second line always rhymes with the fourth in each quatrain. The last quatrain sees a sudden abundance of alliteration: salted, sobered, speaking, stars, and soldiers, and adds a soothing quality, though the poem's tone is. The owl's cry is the centre and hope of the poem. It is a symbol of mourning and melancholy, a sad sound, as well as a symbol of beauty and life. The owl will always cry out no matter how many people have died in a war, and it signals the comfort that life will go on and the world will still exist, no matter how bleak things may seem. Robert Frost, 1874-1963. Two roads diverged, separated. Two roads that are separate and going different ways. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though, as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. Trodden leaves. When a person walks on leaves on the ground, the leaves usually turn black. A wood. Notice that you can't see beyond the first or second row of trees. The wood here implies the future that we know little about, know nothing about. The two roads which the speaker stands before represent the choices that we confront daily in our life. We have to think carefully and weigh the chances and benefits we will acquire before determining which choice to take. This careful choosing makes the difference at the end. We have only one chance to pick.